How different is Snow White from book to screen?
I don't know.
Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is a Disney movie released in 1937 based off the book titled Snow White, published by the Brothers Grimm in 1812. But how different is the fairy tale from the motion picture? The book opens with the origin of the title character, where a queen was sitting by the window, embroidering while watching snowflakes fall down like feathers from the sky. This zoning out causes her to prick her finger on the needle, dropping 3 drops of blood on the snow. The sight of the bright red made the queen wish she had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of her embroidery frame. Because this is a fairy tale, her wish comes true and has a daughter with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony, who she names Snow White. Unfortunately for the queen, she died immediately after Snow White's birth. A year later, the king remarried a woman described as beautiful, but proud and overbearing, meaning she feared anyone would surpass her looks. This is all something the animated movie skipped over, instead starting Snow White in her youth. They also referred to her lips being red as the rose, which I guess is more positive than blood. The king is also not in the movie, but also, he's never spoken about again in the book after that first scene. To reassure her beauty, the new queen would use a magic looking glass to ask who was the fairest of us all. However, instead of saying,
Magic mirror on the wall,
the book's version uses the old-timely phrase, looking glass upon the wall. Each time, the looking glass would respond by saying, you are the fairest of them all. But again, the movie jumped over all of that and started off by saying, you're in second place, Snow White is more beautiful. I'm paraphrasing a bit. And when this revelation is made in the original source material, Snow White is only 7 years old, whereas in the animation, it's believed that she's 14. This news was the turning point for the Queen's hatred towards Snow White. When we first meet the title character in the movie, she's singing a song.
I'm wishing.
The first of what would be many in the film, but all these tunes are original, as the book is not a musical. Seeking to reclaim top spot on Fairy Tale's Next Top Model, the Queen has a huntsman take Snow White into the woods and kill her. But as he draws his cutlass, Snow White begs him not to take her life, instead saying she would go away into the wild wood and never come home again. The huntsman takes pity on her and allows her to run away, believing a wild animal would for sure devour her. This differs from the movie, giving the huntsman more humanity, stopping himself before Snow needed to plead her case, even revealing the Queen's intentions to her and being the one who suggests running away for her own safety. In the Brothers Grimm story, the huntsman had a change of heart once Snow White took off, so when a wild boar came running past on a path to intercept Snow White, he stopped and killed it, taking out its heart and giving it to the Queen. But not in a box like the movie, on a plate after the huntsman salted and cooked it for the Queen to eat. That's right, the Queen thought she was eating Snow White's heart, although there are some iterations that I read which state that it was her lungs and liver. The scene where Snow White runs away in the forest is depicted pretty accurately as to how it's described in the book, getting caught on bushes and stones, running in terror. But she's not comforted by charming animals. In fact, there was no indication that there were any animals with her at all during the whole book.
With a smile and a song.
When she arrives at the small house, the first thing Snow White and the forest animals did was clean it. But in the book, it was literally described as the opposite, saying everything there was very small, but as pretty and clean as possible. The table was even set with food, where she ate from each plate and drank from each cup. Basically, her logic was, if I take a little bit from each, I'm still saving some for the people whose food this actually is. She then has a Goldilocks moment, determining which bed to sleep in. One bed was too short, another was too long, which I don't know how a bed can be too long, but anyway, she chose the 7th bed to sleep in, which was quite right. But in the movie, Snow White sleeps across 3 beds, while Bambi and his alive mum sleep in another. While asleep, the 7 dwarfs arrive home from digging in the underground mountains. They find Snow White and notice how beautiful she is, so decide to let her sleep, meaning the 7th dwarf just ends up sharing a bed with another, swapping each hour until morning. This differs from the movie, where their loud discussion wakes her up. It's also worth mentioning that none of the 7 dwarves are named in the Brothers Grimm tale, unlike the movie, where they were named Doc, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, and Dopey. When Snow White and the 7 dwarfs woke up, they allowed her to stay if she kept the house clean, cooked, washed, made the beds, sewed, and knitted, while in the animation, she offered to do that all herself. After the Queen learns the truth about Snow White still being alive, she painted her face and dressed herself to look like an old peddler woman, but this effect was achieved with a magic potion in the film. This disguise was then used to sell lace to Snow White. She let the elderly lady inside to make her one, but the Queen pulled so tight that it literally took Snow White's breath away. The Queen left the cottage before the dwarves returned to find Snow White lying passed out on the floor, so they cut the lace, bringing life back into her. Therefore, upon checking if she's the prettiest again, the Queen learns of Snow White's survival and goes to plan B. A poisoned comb. Basically, the movie skipped over the Queen's first 2 attempts and went straight to the apple. But when she tries to sell the comb to her in the book, despite being in a different disguise, Snow White declines to let her inside. However, she still takes the comb, brushes her hair, and falls to the floor. Luckily, the 7 dwarves once again save her by removing the comb from Snow White's hair. Finally, we get to the poisoned apple, but in the Brothers Grimm tale, only half of the fruit is red, while the other is white. This is how the disguised Queen convinces Snow to eat it, by telling her to eat the red part while she eats the white part to prove it's not poisonous. Which, if anything, should be more suspicious that they're eating different colours. Obviously, Snow White is desperate to eat an apple from a stranger, so eats it and falls to the floor dead. However, there's once again another difference between the 2 mediums. Firstly, the Queen returns home on page and is told by the looking glass that she is the fairest now of all, whereas on screen, she's immediately chased down by the dwarves and forest creatures before falling to her death. When the 7 dwarves find Snow White dead this time, they don't know how she was poisoned, so they don't know how to save her. 3 days pass in the book and they still haven't buried her because she still looks like someone who's more asleep than dead. Therefore, like the movie, put her in a glass coffin. Now, in the movie, the prince first appears at the very beginning, singing a song with Snow White, before not reappearing until the final 60 seconds of the feature. So very little screen time. However, the prince has even less page time because he doesn't first appear in the book until after her death. He comes across her body when riding through the mountains and notices how beautiful she is. He then asks the dwarfs if he can buy her off them, in which they tell him that they couldn't part with her even for all the gold in the world. However, the prince insists, for he cannot live without looking upon Snow White. So the dwarves give her to him for free. Servants of the prince then carry the coffin back to his castle, but as they're walking back, one of them stumbles on a bush, causing the piece of apple Snow White ate to dislodge from her throat, bringing her back to life. This was achieved in the movie by the prince unconsensually kissing the dead 14-year-old. The story ends there for the movie, but the book sees the pair marry, where they even invited the Queen, but only so they could force her to wear burning hot iron shoes and make her dance in them until she dropped dead. And they lived revengefully ever after. But probably the most notable difference between the Brothers Grimm story and the Disney movie is that Snow White is a book and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is a movie. Wow, look at all those differences. So many differences. Good thing no one is only focusing on just one element for Disney's live action version. Nope, that's definitely not happening. We've all been complaining about every single one of these differences. I'm of course kidding. The hate Rachel Zegler got for this movie is insane on so many levels. In 2022, Rachel Zegler was interviewed after the D23 presentation for Snow White, where she said this.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
That is a fact. There are so many elements in the original animation that are outdated.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird.
That is also true. It is weird that someone would stalk another person. You can still enjoy something and recognize its flaws. You don't have to get defensive about it.
That is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
Why is Rachel getting hate for this? You know, she didn't write the script. She's just telling you what it's about. If you don't like the direction the movie's going in, fine. But there was no reason for her to receive that hate. And if we go back to the original source material, she was never dreaming about true love, nor did she and the prince kiss. As for the animation, the prince only has about 70 seconds of screen time. He doesn't even serve a purpose until the very last scene in the movie. If anything, the live-action remake sounds closer to the original source material. If you don't like these changes, you legally don't have to watch this movie. If the original is your favourite movie in the history of movies ever movied, it ain't going anywhere. You can still watch it. Disney's live-action remake isn't going to diminish the impact of that film. This may sound crazy, but not all movies are targeted to you. This reimagining could very well be to inspire the next generation. Even if this movie does have some saving kiss, when Disney made Maleficent, the way Sleeping Beauty woke up was way better and more impactful than the original animation, instead of being a damsel in distress saved by some random prince. Personally, movies with a damsel in distress undermines the entire film for me. So to see a more modern take on Snow White actually makes me interested in Disney's live-action remake. Of course, women can both dream about romance and be a strong leader, it doesn't have to be one or the other, but Snow White's affection between her and the prince is nowhere near as noteworthy as someone like Aladdin and Jasmine or Beauty and the Beast, because they actually built up those relationships throughout the movie. I think a better ending for Snow White would be if a teardrop from the Seven Dwarfs dropped on her skin to bring her back to life, because we actually see their friendship developed in the movie. Now that's true love. So those were the first interviews people were mad at. Then it was time for people to do what they do best and dig up any dirt they could find on her to make Rachel out to be this terrible person. Here's clip number 2.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again.
People interpreted this as she hates the movie. How dare someone get scared by a scary scene in a movie as a kid? You know who else was scared? The UK Film Board. They literally deemed the movie too scary for children, so when released in cinemas, people under the age of 16 were required to be accompanied with an adult. And look at how ungrateful Rachel is supporting writers and actors, saying they should get paid for their work.
If I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
Personally, I think that money should go to the billionaire CEOs. At no stage in any of those interviews did Rachel Zegler say that she hated Snow White. Even if you think she was disrespecting her own movie, guess who else has disrespected their own movie? Robert Pattinson for Twilight?
It seemed like it was a book that wasn't supposed to be published.
Harrison Ford for Star Wars?
Did you shoot Greedo first, or did Greedo shoot you first?
I don't care.
Ryan Reynolds for Green Lantern?
Please don't make the super suit green. Or animated.
I guess it's all just fun and games when a man is saying it. Here's a clip from Screen Junkies of the Russo brothers saying they didn't even like the character of Captain America before signing on to direct The Winter Soldier.
Cap was not a favorite character of mine growing up. The issue I had with Cap as a character is that I found him very square. So our whole approach with the movie was, how can we make Cap interesting to a comic book fan like myself who didn't love the character?
Where was the hate for any of these people? And I'm glad they didn't get hate, but neither should have Rachel. And it's not just these interviews from Rach that people are getting angry about, there are also people complaining that her skin colour isn't light enough. Not only does Snow White's skin colour not affect the story in any way, but that's not how names work. My last name is Low, and I'm actually pretty tall. At no point is it stated that her name is Snow White because of the colour of her skin. You could have the character be literally any skin colour, and the only thing that would change is one line in the entire movie. In fact, you would only be changing 2 words. Instead of
skin white as snow,
it would be skin X as Y. The animated movie already changed this part of the story by saying
lips red as the rose
instead of red as blood. Saying her skin is as white as snow is a description of the character's appearance. Snow White isn't remembered because of the title character's physical look. It's remembered because of the story. A story that would be exactly the same regardless of her shade of skin. If you're complaining, this is snow, this is animated Snow White, that is not white as snow. If I said to describe Rapunzel in 3 words, straight, white, and female wouldn't even make top 10. Oh, so if the skin colour doesn't matter, I guess we'll just get Ryan Gosling to play Black Panther. Firstly, the character Black Panther acts as a symbol for a civilization that avoided colonialism. So having the character be white would completely change who they are. Secondly, characters who are black are significantly underrepresented in media. Positive representation is important. When a youngling sees someone who looks like them, whether they've got the same skin colour, or are the same gender, or are the same sexuality, or are deaf, or an amputee, it inspires them and makes them feel accepted by society. If you listen to these groups of people, they'll tell you that growing up, they felt like there was something wrong with them because those characters were never shown in movies or TV. And if they were, it was in a negative sense or a minimal role. The Black Panther and Captain Marvel movies didn't make $1 billion dues at the box office because they were the greatest movies ever made. They made that much because they were the first 2 movies in the MCU to have leads with characters who look different from what's so often seen on screen. And this success wasn't just because of the Marvel brand either. Outside of the Avengers films, only Iron Man 3 and Captain America Civil War crossed $1 billion before them. People just like to pick and choose certain aspects of a character or story to get annoyed by. When Zendaya was revealed to be MJ, people complained because Mary Jane in the comics isn't black. However, Zendaya plays Michelle Jones Watson, an original character for the movie. Another original character is Astrid. That's right. Astrid from How to Train Your Dragon does not exist in the books, yet people are still complaining that the live-action version's skin colour isn't historically accurate. You know, in a movie about dragons. When Hailey Bailey was cast as the Little Mermaid, people complained because they said mermaids aren't black, which, to be fair, I also have never seen a mermaid that is black. Although now that I think about it, I don't even know if I've ever seen a mermaid at all. There was outrage when it was reported Letitia Lynch would be 007 in No Time to Die. Even though she wasn't playing James Bond, she was just briefly taking on that code. The 2016 Ghostbusters movie trailer is the most disliked movie trailer of all time. People lost their minds when they made Ocean's 8, even though George Clooney's Ocean's 11 is also a reboot. Captain Marvel was review bombed before it was released, and every other female-led MCU movie or show was also review bombed before they were released. Again, before it was released. One more time for people who aren't understanding what I'm saying. If you don't like She-Hulk Attorney at Law, Ms. Marvel, The Marvels, or Agatha All Along, that's totally fine. But they were all review bombed, say it with me, before they were released. Do you see a pattern here? These complaints have absolutely nothing to do with changing an aspect of the original source material, because I just went over Snow White and no one is protesting any of the other changes that have been made. So don't try and use this excuse that it's not historically accurate or it's not what's written on page, because I guarantee most of you have never even read the original source material for any of these examples. These are fictional movies with fictional characters. You claim it's not sexist or racist or homophobic or whatever, but why is it every time something like this happens, the only groups of people who get hate are those who are women, who are a part of the LGBTQ+ community, or are any skin colour other than white? This is not an issue of changing something from source material to screen. This is an issue of sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, and every other form of bigotry. We live in a society where if a man catcalls a woman, making her feel uncomfortable, it's the woman's fault for wearing something too revealing. Women are called liars because why would they have waited so long to tell the police about abuse from a man if it wasn't made up? Do you see why women get so frustrated with men? Every female has an example. Instead of blaming the root cause, that being the man, we're blaming women for not conforming to a sexist society. It'd be like having your phone stolen and blaming the person for owning a phone in the first place. It's literally the definition of victim blaming. I'm exhausted by all of this, so I can't even imagine what it must be like for people who don't look like me, a white man, to be told that they don't want their representation on screen. Even when the first images for the movie came out, people were saying the most offensive things they could think of, as if there's only supposed to be one type of people in this world. I have seen an overwhelming amount of people hate on Rachel for the comments she made, and next to no one called out this bullying. I'm in the vocal minority here, but I know I'm in the right, so I don't care how many people disagree with me on this issue. This behaviour towards someone is completely unacceptable, and it genuinely baffles me the lack of empathy a lot of people have in the world. We really need to do better as a society, so I hope people don't get defensive about this. If these are issues you've been complaining about in the past, acknowledge that to yourself and start listening to women, to people with different skin colours, to people who are a part of the LGBTQ+ community. Constantly getting mad at representation is only going to make you fall further behind. Bigotry will never be tolerated again like when it was brushed over in the past, so stop trying to move society back in that direction. Disney's live-action Snow White movie will probably do poorly at the box office, but before you say your favourite meaningless rhyme, go woke, go broke, there are people who don't want to see it because of Rachel's casting, there are people who don't want to see it because of Gal Gadot's casting, there are people who don't want to see it because of the negative representation of dwarfism, there are people who are over Disney's live-action remakes, and there are people who just don't need another retelling of a story that's already been told 1,000 times before. Basically, there are many factors that leaves very few left who are actually interested in seeing this movie in cinemas.
You know, I really don't remember you being this opinionated.
Hey, you want to hear some fun facts about Snow White?
Oh, yes!
Here are some fun facts about Snow White. The Hollywood film industry was so confident that the movie was going to fail that they labelled it Walt Disney's Folly. However, it was the opposite of a failure, making 4 times as much money as the second highest grossing film that year and becoming the highest grossing movie of all time, keeping that title all the way until the next year when Gone in the Wind beat it. But the profits from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was enough to build Disney Studios in Burbank, California. There were 25 songs written for the movie, 9 recorded, and 8 ended up in the final film. The tune that missed out was called Music in Your Soup, which, believe it or not, was a song about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs eating soup.
With the zum of the music in your soup.
On top of that, it was also the first movie to release its film soundtrack. Back then, it took 3 vinyl records to store just 8 songs. If you told them about Apple Music, their head would explode. Speaking of firsts, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is the first ever animated feature film in US history. Its cultural significance even led it to being selected as the first animated movie to be added to the National Film Registry. Unused names for the Seven Dwarfs were Blabby, Busy, Crabby, Daffy, Deefy, Dirty, Dumpy, Flabby, Gabby, Gaspy, Gloomy, Hotsy, Lazy, Nifty, Scrappy, Shifty, Snoopy, Stubby, Thrifty, and Wheezy. 750 artists worked on the movie, creating over 2 million sketches. Walt Disney even had animals wandering about to give artists more accurate references to inspire off. The voice change of the Queen from youthful to elderly came about by the actor removing her false teeth.
One bite, and all your dreams will come true.
Snow White is a character that has been adapted to screen many times, so let me know in the comments which movie version is your favourite. But thanks for watching. Don't forget to absolutely obliterate those like, subscribe and share buttons. I'm just kidding. Only do it with enough force that it registers. I don't want any of you breaking whatever device you're watching this on.